After school, every Wednesday we wear red.
What it took was our relationships with our coworkers, building strategic relationships with the community members, right?
And the goal is to stop an active ICE raid.
Our working conditions are their learning conditions, right? And so when we're fighting for better working conditions, we're fighting for better learning conditions for them too.
Hi. My name is Stephan. I'm from Portland, and I'm a member of the Burgerville Workers Union. For those of you who don't know about the Burgerville Workers Union or know what Burgerville is a regional, like eco-conscious, greenwashed, locally sourced fast food chain that runs across Washington and Oregon. It's got 42 locations, 1,200 employees or so. It's not publicly traded and non-franchised, so it's just about 4 people own all those locations. So it's a sneakily large and massive, like powerful fast food company in the region. And I guess like another little bit of context for Portland. Portland is like one of the fastest growing cities in one of the fastest growing states. So right now we're seeing like a really wide, like intense wave of gentrification, really intense raises in cost of living. It's been like really hard for a lot of folks, especially when we've been seeing like stagnant wages in the area for a long time. The other bit is that this is all within the context of the national, which I'm sure you all are familiar with, like Fight for 15, that a lot of labor unions like SEIU were running fast food strikes, fast food organizing in various different cities across the country, like prominently in like Chicago, Milwaukee, Seattle, New York, St. Louis. None of that organizing happened in Portland. So there was no fast food organizing over the last like 8 years or so in which that wave has been happening. So I work at Burgerville. I work at the Gladstone Burgerville. I've been a part of this campaign since 2015. And conditions at our stores, they suck. It's general, it's like the standard thing that you will see at any fast food location. We start at minimum wage. There's no tips, extremely high volume, extremely busy, really understaffed. People experience lots of burns and falls. We have really erratic schedules. The way our schedules would work is we're only scheduled 1 week at a time. We get our schedule about 2 days before. So there's no real way to plan for like doctor's appointments, for your social life, for your political organization meetings. It's tough to fit all that together. And in addition to like your hours could like widely oscillate from near full-time, 40 hours, to like the next week to like 15 hours. So it's almost impossible to budget, almost impossible to plan. A lot of sexual harassment in the workplace, a lot of like racist denials of raises for workers, and inaccessible benefits. So like while as a company they will like publicly claim this like eco-conscious, community first narrative, the benefits that they have are mostly inaccessible. I was scheduled and averaged 29.5 hours. In my time there, you need 30 hours to qualify for benefits. And many of our coworkers experience extreme housing precarity. A lot of folks are undergoing eviction, near eviction, are living out of their cars, living with family members, like desperately trying to move out in extremely precarious situations. So we began to organize, and we organized. We're affiliated with the we're affiliated with the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, the Portland chapter. Yeah. And we started organizing in our shops and in the communities. We organized without a staff, and we organized with no intention for waiting for like legislation or politicians to come and save us. And so we started building relationships. We started having conversations with our coworkers, having one-on-ones, getting coffee, going to get drinks, playing laser tag. And in those conversations, we started building the platform for like what the union wanted. What did we need to change to make this place livable? And so we came up with our list of demands through this process. We were fighting for a $5 raise across the board for everybody in the implementation of tip jars. We fought for the end to E-Verify. For those that don't know, E-Verify is a system that employers voluntarily opt into to check folks' social security numbers as like an extra level of security. It's used primarily to target undocumented folks and make it a lot harder for folks who don't have their social security system like in order from getting hired. So we wanted to force them to opt out of that. We were pushing for accessible healthcare for all workers, for transportation subsidies to and from work, for childcare subsidies. A lot of our coworkers are single parents, really struggling parents, consistent scheduling, and general safety at work. And so we started organizing around these points, and we started building a lot of momentum. And through these one-on-one conversations, we found the leaders in the stores, we developed shop committees across multiple stores so that by the time in April of 2016, about 4 stores went public with their shop committees that they developed. That quickly grew to 5, and then by the beginning of 2018, we doubled in size to 8 shops public, and now with majority in each of those stores union membership. This accounts for about 20% of the total stores in the company, and our shop committees were strategically located in some of their most profitable locations. This is all extremely hard to do. Just really can't emphasize how difficult it was to organize in an industry that has a turnover rate that's over 100%, in which folks are experiencing oftentimes like extreme crises in their lives like while they're at work. And I think like one of the biggest hurdles that we kept running into time and time again was this extreme feeling of not deserving the demands, not deserving any sort of change, and that the hardships and the exploitation, which everybody was deeply aware of in like a visceral way every single day, was a thing that we deserved, and it was a thing that was inevitable. And so, yeah, those conditions made it extremely difficult, and it was very slow going, but eventually we were able to get these shops to majority, and then we then began organizing stewards councils. So we would elect shop stewards within each store, and they would run a shop committee that would have like democratic decision making for what the store itself is doing, as well as reporting back to like the larger union body in our ability to coordinate between all 8 stores and strategize around what sort of actions we were going to do. So after we went public, we're fighting every day in a public way. And so one of the smallest things we did is we all wore buttons. We had a variety of buttons that we're wearing every day. One of my favorites that my coworkers designed was one that just simply said, "The union is lit." That we wear every day. It's tight. We marched on our boss repeatedly, constantly in many different stores, like for lots of different reasons. Like sometimes there's one union member who's like particularly hot-headed, who like during a rush was getting disrespected by a manager, just like walked off the job. So quickly folks like mobilized on the shop floor, marched on the manager, and they're like, "Gregorio's like getting his job back, right? Like he's coming back to work tomorrow." And the manager's like, yeah, whatever. And sure enough, he had his job. There were workers at the convention center location, which is one of the busiest locations, also stayed open the latest. That means like workers were getting out about 3 in the morning, which is after when public transportation stops running. So workers at that store organized, they signed a petition with almost everybody in the store that they delivered to management that gave them the ultimatum that they were going to close the store earlier so that folks would no longer have to walk 6 miles home or waste about more than half of their day's wages on an Uber, or the workers were going to shut the store down early themselves. The managers had the choice. And a week later, they changed it. They changed the time that they're closing. They revamped the training program, which is what folks were asking for because turnover was so high, and closing at that store is like one of the worst jobs possible. They revamped the training program, and it immediately improved a lot of people's lives. In December, they started running a program where they started cutting labor costs. So as like bosses obviously do frequently, we started running on like skeleton crews. So we lost hours, were understaffed at work. So workers at one store that organized a work to rule. And so they're pissed off that if this was the crew that we were going to be forced to work with, like this is the speed that you're going to get your food at. And so folks like went and brought the scale out from the back, and they started like measuring out exactly like how much mayonnaise was going on every single bun, and like would like make sure that it's only 2 pickles, and would measure in cups like the amount of onions that were going on each burger. And all of a sudden, like burgers that would take normally like 45 seconds to be assembled, were coming out like about 20-minute waits. And again, shortly afterwards, managers came up to like union leadership at that store and were like, yeah, it really seems like this isn't going to work. I think we're going to be scheduling more people. We've been organizing monthly like dinner rush pickets at different stores. Sometimes they're issue specific. So if they like fire one of our union members for some bullshit, we'll immediately like mobilize the next week our coalitions and turn folks out and shut them down. Like especially during like Blazers games, the convention center location is just like a few blocks away from Blazers games, and like right before a Blazer game, we're talking like several $1,000s in just 1 hour. We'll like absolutely empty it out. So we've been running that program for about every month. For years now at this point. We organized a mutual aid network. So in the time where we don't have these benefits, we don't have the kind of like support that makes like working at Burgerville livable. We organized a network, like a logistical network, to pick up food boxes from a local church that would then deliver them to Burgerville workers. We were able to get subsidized bus passes for folks, so we were able to cut folks' transportation costs each month in half. And we also organized to give benefits to folks where we would cover about 8 hours a month in childcare costs for folks, which is like meager in the face of like how much childcare costs, but it was a first attempt at our union to start materially supporting each other. We also organized a network of folks to offer GED tutoring for folks who wanted to pursue that. Besides all that, we had like an extremely active social media presence and web resources and press contacts. So then on Labor Day in 2017, we organized our first strike action where workers at one store walked off the job, refusing to work on a holiday for not holiday pay. So they walked off the job on Labor Day, and that was our first strike action. It was amazing. We had a big picket. It's really exciting, and people are extremely nervous, and it really broke through in a really tangible way, the strike ice in many different stores. And we knew also that this one-day strike at one store was never going to be enough to break Burgerville to get the demands that we needed. So we started organizing for a bigger strike, for a longer strike. So then, by the time February rolled around, we had organized four stores that authorized the strikes, and 4 stores walked off the job in the course of over 4 days in what our amateur social historian archival research indicates was the largest single franchise fast food strike in the United States since 1972. It was about, we want to say about like 50 folks walked off the job those days. Yeah. It was wild. And at the end of that strike, in preparation for that strike, we had done like a lot of extreme, like deep coalition outreach to a lot of labor unions. We fundraised like over $10,000 for our strike funds. We turned out like the steel workers and the carpenters would show up on our picket lines. We're running picket lines for 12 hours a day during that strike. The carpenters like turned out with like giant inflatable pig and a giant inflatable rat that we had right outside of the Burgerville. Yeah, a lot of other community organizations like really came through for us then. On that last day too, we also launched our community boycott, which is ongoing. We use the boycott as like primarily kind of like as a tool to damage their brand, and just like want to make sure that we emphasize that we don't think that Burgerville's ever going to cave merely because of consumer action, but that the way that we build power is through our community relationships and through shop floor action, through disruption of like the everyday operations at our Burgervilles. But the boycott is still ongoing, and we have the boycott until Burgerville signs a contract with our union, which then brings us to kind of our most recent tactic that we employed, which was running NLRB certification elections at 2 stores. So after, we've been fighting since April 2016, it's now April of 2018, and Burgerville is still not budged on many of our demands. Still has refused to recognize us voluntarily. So we filed for elections in 2 stores, the 92nd and Powell store and the store that I worked at, the Gladstone store. This is us filing. We tried to give them a notice of election and they locked us out. Yeah, it was great. There's one, they were hiding, we could see them inside, like hiding behind plants. It was ridiculous. And so we filed for elections and we won. We won in landslides. 92nd and Powell won 18-4, and we won at our store 17-5, and became now the only certified fast food union in the United States. Yeah. Which is wild, right? It's like a workforce of over 4.5 million folks. It's a workforce that's like one of the fastest growing industries that's been constantly growing since the recession. It's one of the only industries that's still like seeing job growth since the recession. So like it's a sector that we still need to struggle further in. So now I guess like an update of where we're at. We're on our 5th bargaining session now with the company. Bargaining sucks. It's like really arduous and boring, and their like goal is to drag it out as much as possible, which in many ways is fine because we know that our power is not at the bargaining table. The power is in our shops. The power is like in our relationships with our coworkers. It's the power that we build by like our inner shop committees, where we bake a bunch of lasagnas and like invite our shop committees over and like talk shit about our boss for like 6 hours, and a strike like gets planned out of that. Like that's where our power is going to be. And it's not going to be at the bargaining table. And it's still building, and it's still going. So I think as far as like some big takeaways that I feel like I've gotten out of this 3 years involvement in this campaign, is that I think the timing is exactly right for this kind of campaign. I think this campaign didn't come out of anywhere. Within the IW itself, there's a tradition of struggling in fast food. The Jimmy John's workers in Minneapolis and in Baltimore were organizing. You have the Starbucks workers organizing in the early 2000s. And those struggles like deeply informed our own organizing styles and our own stories we're able to talk to our coworkers about. And our vision, I think, for where the like historical impact of what our union is going to be able to offer going to depend upon other folks organizing in their workplaces, other folks like taking upon the legacy that's been like left by so many courageous Burgerville workers and organizing in their spots. And I think also it's important to remember that this campaign started out with about like 5 people in a room with no staff and no budget. 5 people in a room, no staff, no budget. And what it took was our relationships with our coworkers, building strategic relationships with the community members, right? With faith congregations. When we were still underground, we were meeting with faith leaders. We're telling them that like fast food, we can't tell you where, but fast food workers in Portland are like on the move. It's gonna be big, like get on board. Meeting with labor unions, meeting with tenants alliances, and we built this whole coalition. Without that coalition, like none of this absolutely would have been possible. And I think we're seeing like a lot of reverberations around Portland from this. There's another underground campaign in a fast food chain happening in Portland now. In addition, Burgerville Workers have been partnering closely with another independent union, which is the New Seasons Workers United. It's a grocery chain. And now Burgerville Workers, New Seasons Workers, and this underground campaign are like meeting together and forming like an industrial organization, collaborating. Collaborating to build power across the city and across our workplaces. And so I think as organizers, as revolutionaries, I think we need to be thinking about how we're getting past material wins, past the goods, and how we're like really building power in our workplaces and building power in our cities, right? Fight for 15 had wins. Oregon itself, despite not having a Fight for 15 campaign, saw legislation transform our minimum wage levels in like slow incremental amounts until like 2022. Those strategies have like gotten goods. The question I think though is for us as organizers is how do we build power? How do we build power that maintains an ongoing ability to disrupt? How do we build the power that has like the ongoing potential to interpersonally transform ourselves and our coworkers, right? I think like thinking about, for me, power in this organization was talking to my coworkers after picket, like at the Denny's, like, what'd you think? And then being like, I lied to my mom to be here. This is the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. like I'm all about this now. It's about building leaders. It's about building like new folks who have never understood themselves to have the capacity to make substantive changes, who've like understood themselves to always be on the sidelines, like in their classrooms, always been on the political sidelines, and to engage this into like ongoing community political organizations. And it's going to be about model sharing, right? It's going to be about replicability. It's going to be about moving and transforming and like learning from these lessons and seeing campaigns like this pop up in other cities. And it's going to take bold and loud like anti-capitalist workplace action, right? I think like we as organizers need to not shy away from like anti-capitalism in our conversations with our coworkers. Hear this a lot from a lot of union staffers that they're like, oh, IWW, like our workers are like really ready for that. And I tell them the story of one of my coworkers early on when I started working there who came up to me one day and told me about his friend's partner who had just been deported back to the Philippines. And he's like, yeah, man, this really makes me think. And he turns to me, he's like, I think it's time we became socialists. and that like anti-capitalism, that sentiment is like a strong thing like throughout many of these shops, and I think it's like a thing that we need to like not shy away from, and we need to build on, and we need to build through like tangible models that provide alternatives to the organizations that exist, alternatives to like a left that a lot of people don't have faith in, and alternatives to politicians that'll always sell us out, and alternatives to nonprofits. Yeah, that's all I got. Let's go build power.
So before we drop the music, bring out the drinks, and bring out the step and repeat so you can take pictures, we will take a couple of questions and comments to ask, our speakers, and also you can speak to them afterwards as well. So, are there any questions, comments?
So he's asking about like, when you love your students, and correct me if I'm wrong, like, you love your students and you love your work, but like, you're about to do something that's going to disrupt their education as well. And like, how do you, get to that step? Part of it is that we have a tradition of union organizing on our campus, and so it's not out of the ordinary. Like, our students have already seen their professors on strike 2 years earlier. A lot of our students kind of get these issues. They're also know that when they graduate, they got crushing debt ahead of them, and they know that like a lot of the issues that we're facing are stuff that some of them are already facing and that they're gonna face. So there actually was a lot of support, even before we actually went on strike. There was a undergraduate-graduate alliance formed, and so a lot of the undergraduates were already organizing undergraduates to support the strike before we even went on strike. And so it didn't seem like, oh, we're betraying our students. It seemed more like we're standing with our students, and they also kind of understood, a lot of students understood like that our working conditions are their learning conditions, right? And so when we're fighting for better working conditions, we're fighting for better learning conditions for them too.
Are there any other comments or questions? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you. Yeah. All right. Oh, you got
it. So I actually joined the Rapid Response Network like probably 4 months ago. Another comrade of mine who's also part of the Black Rose Alley chapter was in the assembly in its inception. And so it took a while for different assemblies of people to constantly come in, because once the activists and the liberals started kind of like, you know, they're getting tired of meeting all the time, right? That's when the community members came in and said, okay, this is our concern. Like, this was what we want to see, like, because of the immigrant population, working class population, right? So it took from February 2017, probably like 6 months to a year, to really get everything fully established, the sanctuary school and the rapid response network, for everybody, for it to get set up, and then for people to volunteer, okay, I'm gonna take this time slot, I'm gonna take this time slot. I think the committee for the Popular Assembly meets every week on Wednesdays. So if you're interested in it, you could ask me or my other comrade, and I'll direct you to him.
I'd say folks want to talk.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna close the session for questions, but of course you can definitely chat and go up to people and ask questions and discuss and strategize and whatever else. It's warm in here. We want to open the doors. We want to put some music. Just to keep in mind, those from LA, if you want to know about Black Rose events and things, the sign-up sheet was in the front, but I think it might be in the back now. There's a computer there where you can sign up. Also, there's literature and T-shirts. The Step and Repeat is going to be moved over there with lights for pictures, and we're going to also put music on. And we want to thank the speakers for putting so much effort and for their participation. And thank you all for being here, and enjoy the rest of the night.